The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had seen many moments in its 10,000 years. Wars had ended here. Alliances had formed. Species had begged for mercy on this very floor. But never, in all that time, had the hall been so quiet as it was now. Ambassador stood at the center platform. She was a small woman by human standards, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that showed nothing. No anger, no sadness, just calm acceptance of what was about to happen. The council members sat in their floating seats above her, 12 species, 12 representatives. All of them looked down at this human woman like she was something beneath their notice. This was normal. This was how it had always been. The Galactic Council recognizes the human representative, said High Counselor. He was a tall and gray-skinned, with 4 arms folded across his chest. His voice carried the same boredom it always did when humans spoke. You may present your matter. Bowed her head slightly, just enough to show respect, not enough to show submission. Honored Council, she said. Her voice was soft but clear. I come before you today to deliver a notice. After 312 years of membership in this council, humanity has voted to withdraw. The silence lasted for exactly 4 heartbeats. Then the laughter started. Counselor of the let out a high whistling sound that passed for amusement in his species. The representative shook his massive head, his tusks catching the light. Even the usually stoic ambassador allowed herself a small smile. Withdraw, said, still chuckling. And where exactly do you think you will go, human? Back to your little planet, back to your tiny corner of space. Yes, said simply. The laughter faded, replaced by confusion. You cannot be serious, said Counselor of the. His voice was deep like thunder. Your species has spread across 40 systems. You have billions living on council worlds. You would abandon all of that. We would. Leaned forward in his seat. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the human woman below. This is some kind of negotiation tactic. What do you want? Better trade agreements, more representation. Name your price, human, and stop wasting our time. Reached into her coat and pulled out a small data chip. She placed it on the platform before her. This contains the official withdrawal documents. All human citizens will be evacuated from council space within 6 standard months. All human businesses will close their operations. All human military vessels will return to Earth territory. All human aid programs will end. She paused. All human medical staff will leave their posts. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed his face. It was not quite worry, not yet, but it was close. You cannot simply leave, he said. There are contracts, obligations. Your species signed treaties. We have lawyers who have reviewed every document, said. Every treaty includes an exit clause. Every contract can be terminated with proper notice. We are giving you 6 months. That is more than required. Counselor Myra of the stood from her seat. Unlike the others, she was not laughing. Her silver skin had gone pale. Ambassador, she said carefully, perhaps we can discuss this privately. Surely there has been some misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Counselor. His voice remained calm. For 300 years, humanity has served this council faithfully. We have fought in your wars. We have healed your sick. We have built your stations and maintained your trade routes. We have done everything asked of us and more. She looked around the great hall, meeting each council member's eyes in turn. And in return, we have been mocked, dismissed, treated as lesser beings. Our requests for fair representation have been 17 times. Our people have been murdered on council worlds with no justice given. Our contributions have been credited to other species in your history books. These are exaggerations, said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. They are documented facts, replied. Every incident is recorded. Every insult is remembered. We asked for nothing but respect and you gave us contempt. She picked up the data chip and held it out. So now we leave, quietly, peacefully, without anger or revenge. We simply choose to no longer be part of something that does not value us. A aide floated down to take the chip from her hand. The hall was completely silent now. "You will regret this," said slowly. "When you realize how much you need us, you will come crawling back." Smiled. It was a small, sad smile that held no joy. "Perhaps," she said, "or perhaps you will realize how much you needed us. Either way, we wish you well, Council. May your future be peaceful." She bowed once more, turned and walked out of the great hall. The doors closed behind her, with a soft sound that somehow felt louder than any explosion. For a long moment, no one spoke. "Let them go," finally said, waving one of his hands dismissively. "They will be back within a year, begging for readmission. Humans cannot survive without us." The other council members nodded and murmured agreement. The session moved on to other matters: trade disputes, border conflicts, the usual business of running a galaxy. None of them noticed the ambassador, Myra, who sat very still in her seat. Her hands were shaking slightly. Unlike her colleagues, she had worked closely with humans for decades. She knew what they did. She knew what they managed. And she knew, with terrible certainty, that the council had just made a mistake they could not yet imagine. 3 weeks later, the evacuation began. Human cargo ships, hundreds of them, started appearing at stations across council space. They came without fanfare, without ceremony. They simply arrived, loaded their people and possessions, and left. Commander Ho oversaw the evacuation of Nexus Station, the largest trading hub in the sector. He was an older man with gray at his temples and hands that had fixed more machines than he could count. "Take only what belongs to us," he told his crews. "Leave everything else exactly as we found it, better if possible." His people obeyed without question. They cleaned their quarters before leaving. They filed proper paperwork. They even left instruction manuals for the systems they had been maintaining. The other species watched them go with amusement at first, then confusion, then, slowly, a creeping sense of unease. Because the humans were not arguing. They were not fighting. They were not making demands or threats or scenes. They were simply leaving. And somehow, that was far more frightening than any war could have been. The first sign of trouble came exactly 23 days after the humans began leaving. A merchant ship arrived at Nexus Station expecting to refuel and resupply. This was a routine trip, one the captain had made 100 times before. He docked at the usual port, connected his ship to the station systems, and waited for the fuel transfer to begin. Nothing happened. He checked his connections. Everything was correct. He sent a message to station control asking for assistance. The reply came from a confused officer. "We are working on the problem. Please wait." The captain waited. An hour passed, then 2, then 5. Finally, a different message arrived. "We apologize. There is no one available who knows how to operate the fuel distribution system. The human technicians who managed it have departed. We are attempting to learn the process." The merchant captain sat in his cockpit and stared at the message for a long time. Then he disconnected from the station and flew to a different port, burning precious fuel he could not afford to waste. This scene repeated itself across council space. Again and again, every day brought new problems. On Prime, the capital world of the council, the public transportation system failed. Human engineers had designed and maintained it for 2 centuries. The who took over discovered that the system was far more complex than they had assumed. It took them 3 weeks to get the trains running again, and even then, they only worked at half capacity. Hospitals began turning away patients. Human doctors had staffed the emergency rooms and surgical centers. They had their own medical professionals, of course, but not enough. Not nearly enough. They had grown dependent on human expertise without ever realizing it. On a dozen different worlds, trade shipments stopped arriving. Human cargo pilots had handled most of the dangerous routes. the ones that pass through asteroid fields or near unstable stars. Other species had considered these jobs beneath them. Now there was no one willing to take the risks. Counselor Myra watched the reports pile up on her desk and felt sick. She had tried to warn them. In the days after Ambassador's announcement, she had gone to each council member privately. She had shown them the numbers. She had explained what humanity actually did for the council. No one had listened. "They are just humans," had said, laughing at her concerns. "We will replace them easily enough. There are thousands of species in the galaxy." But there were not thousands of species willing to do what humans did. There were not thousands of species with human endurance, human creativity, human willingness to take on difficult jobs for modest pay. Myra picked up her communicator and made a call. On a human transport ship 3 days from Earth space, Doctor was eating dinner when the call came through. She looked at the caller identification and sighed. "I wondered how long it would take," she said to her assistant, a young man named. "Please tell me they are not dying." "Not yet," said, checking his own data pad. "But their hospitals are at 200% capacity. They have been sending patients to medical centers, but those are overwhelmed too." Closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had worked on Prime for 15 years. She knew their people. She had delivered their bobbies and held their hands when they died. Leaving had been the hardest thing she had ever done. But she had also watched her human colleagues be insulted and dismissed. She had seen brilliant doctors passed over for promotions because of their species. She had heard council members call humans useful animals when they thought no one was listening. She answered the call. Counselor Myra's face appeared on the screen. The woman looked terrible. Her silver skin was dull with stress, and her eyes had dark circles beneath them. "Dr. Myra said, 'Thank you for taking my call.'" "Counselor, I assume this is not a social conversation." "No," Myra's voice cracked slightly. "We need help. Our hospitals are failing. Our people are dying. The plague has appeared on 3 colony worlds and we have no one who knows how to treat it." Felt her heart clench. The plague was brutal. She had spent 5 years developing a treatment protocol for it. Without that protocol, the mortality rate was over 60%. "I am sorry to hear that," she said carefully. "Please, doctor, I know we have treated your people badly. I know we do not deserve your help. But the children are dying." Was quiet for a long moment, watched her face waiting. Counselor finally said, "I cannot help you." "Cannot or will not?" "Both." His voice was gentle but firm. "I am one doctor. Even if I returned, I could not save everyone. And my return would accomplish nothing but making the council think they can continue treating humans poorly and then ask for our help when things get difficult." "Then what would you have us do?" Myra asked desperately. "Face the consequences of your choices," said. "Learn from them, change, become better." She paused. "And perhaps when you have truly changed there can be new conversations, but not now, not like this." She ended the call. Sat quietly beside her as she cried. She did not cry for long. She had made her choice and she would live with it. But some small part of her would always wonder about the children she could not save. Back on Prime, Counselor Myra stared at her blank screen and felt something she had not felt in centuries. Fear. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had survived wars, plagues, and disasters of every kind. They had always believed themselves strong, unshakable, eternal. But now, watching their systems fail one by one, Myra understood a terrible truth. They had not been strong, they had been supported, carried, propped up by a species they had dismissed as inferior. And now that support was gone. At the next council meeting, tried to project confidence. "These are temporary difficulties," he announced. "We have already begun training programs to replace human workers. Within a few months, everything will return to normal." Our trade revenue has dropped by 40%, Counselor said grimly. 40% in 3 weeks. Pirates have attacked 17 convoys in the outer sectors, added another voice. Human patrol ships kept them suppressed. Now they are growing bold. The plague has spread to 5 more worlds, Myra said quietly. Slammed his fist on his podium. These problems would exist whether the humans were here or not. Would they? Myra asked. When was the last time you heard of a pirate attack in human-patrolled space? When was the last time the plague spread beyond its initial outbreak point? She shook her head. We did not notice what humans did because they did it so well, so quietly, so efficiently. We only see it now because it is no longer being done. The council chamber fell silent. Somewhere in the void between stars, the last human transport convoy crossed out of council space. Commander Ho stood on the bridge and watched the border beacons fade behind them. Sir, his communications officer said, we are receiving messages from council frequencies. Dozens of them. They are asking us to turn back. Ho nodded slowly. Note them in the log, do not respond. Yes, sir. The convoy continued on toward Earth. Behind them, a galaxy began to realize what it had lost. 6 months after the humans left, the galaxy was burning. Not with fire, though there was plenty of that too. It burned with chaos, with desperation, with the slow collapse of systems that no one had realized were connected. Food riots had broken out in 3 major cities. The great agricultural ships that fed the population had stopped running, not because they were broken, but because no one remembered how to navigate the complex shipping routes that avoided radiation zones and gravity wells. Human navigators had handled those routes. Pilots who tried to follow the same paths lost ships, lost cargo, lost lives. The economy had collapsed entirely. Their species had built their wealth on banking and trade, but trade required ships moving goods, and ships required human mechanics, human engineers, human problem solvers who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. Without them, they sat on piles of money they could not spend, surrounded by machines they could not repair. They tried to maintain order, but even their famous discipline was cracking. High Counselor had stopped appearing at public functions. Rumors said he had locked himself in his chambers, watching reports of disasters and refusing to speak to anyone. But the worst was yet to come. Captain stood on the bridge of the research vessel Bright Future, the last human ship still operating in council space. She had been given special permission to finish a long-term research project studying a dying star. Now that project was complete, and she was finally going home. Captain, her science officer said urgently, "You need to see this." Walked to his station and looked at the readings. Her face went pale. "How far?" she asked. 3 systems, maybe 4. The officer swallowed hard. "They will reach Prime within 2 weeks." On the screen, a fleet of ships moved through space. Hundreds of them, thousands. Their hulls were dark and their designs ancient and brutal. They had returned. 10,000 years ago, before the Council existed, they had been the terror of the galaxy. They were conquerors, destroyers, a species that lived only for war. It had taken an alliance of every civilized race to defeat them, to push them back to the outer darkness beyond the galactic rim. For 10, the Council had maintained a defensive line against them. Ships patrolled constantly, watching for any sign of the enemy's return. Weapons platforms stood ready. Warning systems monitored every shadow. Human ships, human weapons, human vigilance. And now, with those ships gone, they had sensed weakness. His hands shook as she reached for the communications panel. Every instinct told her to run, to flee home to safety. But she was still human, and humans did not abandon others to die without warning. She opened a channel to Prime. "Galactic Council, this is Captain of the research vessel Bright Future. I am transmitting emergency data regarding an incursion. Repeat, incursion. Fleet size estimated at 2,000 vessels. Arrival at Prime in approximately 14 standard days. She sent the data and ended the transmission. There was nothing more she could do. "Take us home," she told her pilot. "Maximum speed." On Prime, the message arrived during a council meeting. The emergency alert cut through all other communications, playing warning on every screen in the chamber. For a moment, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Counselors shouted over each other, demanding information, demanding action, demanding someone to tell them this was a mistake. Aides ran in every direction. Alarms began to sound throughout the building. High Counselor stood frozen at his podium. His 4 eyes were wide with terror, and his gray skin had gone almost white. "The defensive line," he whispered. "What happened to the defensive line?" "It was maintained by human crews," Myra said quietly. She was the only one not panicking, perhaps because she had known somehow that something like this would happen. "When they left, the line went dark. We tried to send replacements, but no one knew the systems. No one could keep the sensors operational." "Then we will fight them here," said, trying to regain his composure. "We have fleets, we have weapons." "Our fleets are scattered across the galaxy trying to stop pirates," said grimly. "We cannot recall them in time." "Our weapons platforms were designed by humans," another counselor added. "We have been trying to figure out how to operate them for months. They are still offline." Looked around the chamber at his fellow leaders. These were the rulers of the galaxy, the most powerful beings in known space, and they were helpless. "Contact the humans," he said. Everyone stared at him. "Contact them," he repeated. "Tell them what is happening, beg them to help if you must." His voice cracked. "We cannot do this alone." Myra nodded and left the chamber. She knew it would not work, but she had to try. The message reached Earth 3 days later. Ambassador read it in her office, surrounded by flowers from her garden. She had retired from diplomacy after returning home, content to spend her days growing vegetables and playing with her. She had earned her peace. But peace, it seemed, had not earned her. "They are asking for help," said her old assistant, a man named Min who had followed her into retirement. "They are coming." Set down the message and looked out her window. Earth was beautiful in spring. The cherry trees were blooming, and children played in the streets without fear. "I know what they are," she said softly. "I know what they will do. The Council has ignored us for centuries, mocked us, used us." Min's voice was bitter. "They do not deserve our help." "No," agreed, "they do not." She was silent for a long time. "But the children on Prime did not mock us," she finally said. "The families on Worlds did not vote to dismiss our representatives. The farmers and workers and ordinary people did not choose to treat us as lesser beings." She turned to face Min. "Can we let them die for the sins of their leaders? It is not our responsibility anymore." "No, it is not," picked up the message again. "But perhaps that is exactly why we should help, not because we must, not because we owe them anything, but because we choose to, because that is who we are." Min shook his head slowly. "You will never stop being an ambassador, will you?" Smiled. It was a sad smile, but there was steel beneath it. "Contact our government," she said. "Tell them we need to talk." On Prime, Counselor Myra waited for a response that she did not expect to receive. Around her, the Council prepared for a war they could not win. Ships were being recalled from across the galaxy, but they would not arrive in time. Civilians were being evacuated to underground shelters, but there were not enough shelters for everyone. They were coming, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop them. Myra thought about all the times she had watched humans being dismissed and insulted. All the times she had stayed silent because speaking up would have cost her politically. All the times she had told herself that things would change eventually, that she did not need to rock the boat. She had been a coward, they all had been. And now the bill had come due. Counselor and aide said, rushing up to her. "You have a message from Earth." Myra's heart stopped. She took the data pad with trembling hands and read the words on the screen. Then she read them again, unable to believe what she was seeing. "Counselor," the aide asked, "what does it say?" Myra looked up, and for the first time in months there were tears in her eyes. Tears of hope. The message from Earth was not what anyone expected. Counselor Myra read it aloud to the emergency session, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. "To the Galactic Council, we have received your request for assistance regarding the incursion. After careful consideration, the Human Confederation has decided to respond. However, we must be clear about what this response will look like. We are not returning as your servants. We are not coming to save you because we feel obligated. We are coming because innocent lives are at stake, and we cannot stand by while civilians die. Our fleet will arrive at Prime in 11 days. We will engage thee and attempt to stop their advance. In return, we ask for nothing except the opportunity to discuss a new relationship between our species after the crisis has passed. Signed, Ambassador." The council chamber was silent. "They are coming," said slowly. He sounded almost confused, as if he could not process the information. "After everything, they are coming." "Yes," Myra said, "they are." "Why?" Counselor asked. "We treated them terribly, we mocked them, dismissed them. Why would they help us now?" Myra thought about the message, about the careful words Ambassador had chosen. "Because that is who they are," she said simply. "It is who they have always been. We just refuse to see it." 11 days was not much time, but it was enough for the council to witness something they had never seen before. Human warships began emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system, not the cargo ships and transport vessels the Council was used to seeing. These were warships, real warships, ships that had been hidden away for centuries, maintained in secret, waiting for a day that humans hoped would never come. There was the first to arrive. She was massive, nearly 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that Council scientists could not identify. Her hull was painted black with a single symbol on the side, a golden sun being held in human hands. Behind her came the Defiant, the Unbroken, the Last Hope, and dozens more. Each ship was different, each designed for a specific purpose, but all of them radiated the same message. Humanity had never been weak. They had simply chosen not to show their strength. Captain Du commanded from his position on the bridge. He was a young man for such responsibility, barely 40 years old, but he had trained his entire life for this moment. Every human naval officer had. "Status report," he said calmly. "All ships accounted for, sir. Fleet is at full combat readiness. Enemy forces are 8 days out and holding position." "Holding position?" Du frowned. "The do not hold position, they attack." "Unknown, sir. They stopped advancing approximately 6 hours ago." Du considered this. They were ancient, brutal, but not stupid. They had survived for 10,000 years in exile. They would have scouts, intelligence gatherers, ways of knowing what was happening in Council space. "They saw us coming," he realized. "They are trying to decide what to do." "Sir, we are receiving a communication request. It is from Prime, High Counselor." Du suppressed a sigh, put him through. His face appeared on the main screen. He looked terrible, gray skin hanging loose on his frame, eyes haunted by fear and sleepless nights. "Captain Du said, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I want to express our gratitude for your assistance in this crisis." "Noted," Du said flatly. Waited for more. When nothing came, he continued awkwardly. I wanted to discuss strategy, coordination between our remaining forces and your fleet." "There is nothing to discuss, Counselor. Your remaining forces should stay behind our lines and protect civilian evacuation routes. We will handle the—" "Surely you do not expect to face them alone. There are 2,000 enemy ships." "I am aware of the numbers." Then you must know you cannot win, not alone. Du allowed himself a small smile. With respect, counselor, you have no idea what we can do. You never bothered to find out. He ended the communication. On Prime stared at the blank screen and felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen something in that human captain's eyes. Not arrogance, not false confidence, just calm certainty. The humans knew something the council did not. 5 days later, they made their move. Their fleet surged forward in a massive wave, thousands of ships spreading across the void like a dark tide. Their weapons began firing as soon as they were in range, sending beams of deadly energy toward the human positions. The human fleet did not retreat. It did not scatter or try to avoid the attack. It charged. They led the advance, her engines burning bright as she accelerated toward the enemy. Weapons that had been dormant for centuries came alive, filling space with light and fire. The first ship to face them lasted exactly 3 seconds. Its shields, which had held against Council weapons for 10,000 years, collapsed immediately. Its hull crumpled like paper. It exploded in a ball of flame that was swallowed by the darkness. Then the second ship died, and the third, and the 10th. On the bridge of the Du watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. Human weapons had been designed for this enemy. Human tactics had been developed for this exact scenario. For centuries, while the Council had believed humanity was content to be their servants, human military planners had been preparing for the day when they would return. Enemy formation is breaking, his tactical officer reported. They are attempting to flank us. Squadrons 7 through 12 intercept. All other units maintain pressure on the center. The human fleet moved like a single organism, each ship knowing its role, each captain trusting the others. They had trained together for years. Some of them had trained together for their entire lives. They had never faced anything like this. On Prime, the Council watched the battle through long-range sensors. They saw ships dying by the hundreds. They saw human vessels dancing through enemy fire with impossible grace. They saw weapons they had never imagined tearing through ancient hulls. Hal whispered, "How are they doing this?" Myra stood beside him, watching the same images. "They were never weak," she said softly. "They were never inferior. They simply did not want to fight. They came to us in peace, hopping to find friends." She shook her head. "We gave them contempt instead." "And yet they are here," said, "dying for us." "Yes," Myra's voice was thick with emotion. "That is who they are." The battle lasted for 16 hours. When it was over, the fleet had been reduced to scattered remnants fleeing back toward the galactic rim. Humanity had lost 47 ships. Over 3,000 human sailors had died defending people who had mocked them for centuries. Captain Du surveyed the wreckage from his bridge and felt exhaustion settling into his bones. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we are receiving messages from across Council space, thousands of them. They are all saying the same thing." "What are they saying?" The officer looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you. They are all saying thank you." Du nodded slowly. It was not enough. Words were not enough to repay the debt that had been created today, but it was a start. "Send a message to Ambassador," he said. "Tell her the battle is won. Tell her it is time to come back to the negotiating table." He paused and looked out at the stars, at the drifting wreckage, at the place where so many good humans had died. "And tell her that this time, things are going to be different." 1 month after the Battle of, the Great Hall of the Galactic Council looked very different. The floating seats still circled the central platform, but they were no longer arranged in a hierarchy. The council members no longer looked down on whoever stood before them. Instead, the seats had been lowered, brought to the same level as the speaking platform, a small change that carried enormous meaning. Ambassador walked into the hall for the second time in her life. She moved slowly, using a cane now, her years finally catching up with her. but her eyes were as sharp as ever, and her voice was steady as she took her place at the center of the room. The council members rose as she entered, all of them. Even High Counselor, whose pride had been legendary, stood with his head bowed in respect. Ambassador said, "Thank you for returning." Looked around the hall, remembering the last time she had stood here. The laughter, the contempt, the casual dismissal of everything humanity had done. "I almost did not come," she said honestly. "Many of my people believe we should never speak to the council again, that we should close our borders permanently and leave you to handle your own problems." "We would deserve that," Counselor Myra said quietly. "Yes, you would." His voice was not angry, it was simply tired. "But we are not here to discuss what you deserve. We are here to discuss what comes next." She reached into her coat and pulled out a data chip, just as she had done all those months ago. But this time, the council leaned forward with attention rather than amusement. "This contains our proposal for a new relationship between humanity and the council," said. "I will summarize the key points, but the details are all here for your review." She took a deep breath and began. "First, humanity will return to council space. We will resume our work in trade, medicine, engineering, and defense. But we will no longer do this work for free, or for the insultingly low compensation we received before. We will be paid fairly for our labor, just as any other species would be." Nodded slowly. "That is reasonable." "Second, humanity will receive full representation on this council. 1 seat, equal to any other member species. Our voice will be heard in all decisions that affect the galaxy." "Agreed," said Counselor. "It should have been done long ago." "Third, the history of humanity's contributions will be corrected. Our scientists, our doctors, our engineers, our soldiers, all of them will be recognized for what they did. The records that credited our achievements to other species will be amended." Myra spoke up. "I have already begun this work. The corrections will be complete within the year." Allowed herself a small smile. "I know, Counselor, I have seen your efforts. They are appreciated." She paused, and her expression grew more serious. "Fourth, and this is not negotiable, the Council will establish a formal program to address discrimination against humans and any other species that faces similar treatment. This program will have real authority to investigate complaints and impose consequences. No more incidents swept under the rug. No more murdered humans with no justice given." The chamber was silent. This was the hardest demand, the one that would require the council to admit publicly and permanently that they had failed. Looked at his fellow counselors. One by one they nodded. "We agree," he said heavily. "The program will be established." Studied his face for a long moment, looking for any sign of deception or reluctance. She found none, only shame and perhaps the beginning of genuine change. "Then we have an agreement," she said. The formalities took several more hours. Documents were signed, speeches were given, and promises were made. By the end of it was exhausted, ready to return home to her garden and her. But before she left, Counselor Myra approached her privately. "Ambassador," Myra said softly, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really come back? You could have let us fall. That would have destroyed us, and humanity would have been free of us forever. No more discrimination. No more insults. Why save people who treated you so badly?" Was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "When I was a little girl," she finally said, "my grandmother told me a story. She said that humans were once cruel too. We fought each other constantly. We enslaved each other. We committed terrible acts in the name of power and pride and fear." She looked at Myra with eyes that held centuries of wisdom. "But we changed. Slowly, painfully, over thousands of years, we learned to be better. We learned that kindness was not weakness, that helping others made us stronger, not weaker, that the measure of a civilization is not how it treats its powerful members, but how it treats its weakest." Myra listened, tears forming in her silver eyes. "We came back because that is who we chose to become," said. "Not because you deserved it, not because we owed you anything, but because we will not let your mistakes turn us into something we do not want to be." She reached out and took Myra's hand. "And because we believe that you can change too, as we did, as any species can if they truly want to." Myra could not speak. She simply held the old woman's hand and cried. In the months that followed, the galaxy transformed. Human ships returned to Council space, but they were greeted with celebration rather than contempt. Human doctors arrived at hospitals and found there, and colleagues waiting to work beside them as equals. Human engineers took their positions at stations and discovered that their new actually wanted to learn, to understand, to appreciate what they did. It was not perfect. Change never is. There were still incidents of discrimination, still old prejudices that had to be confronted, still difficult conversations that needed to happen. But for the first time, those conversations were actually happening. Problems were being addressed rather than ignored. On Earth, Captain Du retired from military service and took a position teaching at the Naval Academy. He told his students about about the humans who had died defending a galaxy that had rejected them. "They did not die for the Council," he would say. "They did not die for recognition or reward. They died because they believed in something bigger than themselves. They believed that humanity could be a light in the darkness, even when the darkness seemed overwhelming." He would look at his young students, at the future of humanity, and feel hope. "That is our legacy," he would tell them. "Not our weapons, not our ships, not our strength in battle. Our legacy is our choice to be kind when cruelty would have been easier, to help when walking away would have been justified, to believe in the possibility of change, even when all evidence suggested it was impossible." And far across the galaxy, in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, a new statue was unveiled. It stood at the center of the chamber, carved from white stone, showing a human hand reaching down to help someone up. Beneath it, in every language known to the Council, was written a single phrase. "They did not have to come back, but they did." Counselor Myra stood before the statue on the day of its unveiling and thought about all that had happened. The mistakes, the losses, the pain that could have been avoided if only they had listened sooner. But also the healing, the growth, the possibility of a future that was better than the past. She placed her hand on the statue's base and made a silent promise. Never again. Never again would she stay silent when injustice happened before her eyes. Never again would she let political convenience outweigh moral courage. Never again would she forget the lesson that humanity had taught the galaxy. That sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is leave quietly. And the most powerful thing you can do is choose to come back.